so delighted that you've joined me today. My name is Bridget Wind, and you're listening to Precious 50, a special series where I get to drop some rich, juicy nuggets to help you on your life's journey. This is episode 6 in our series. If you haven't yet listened to the past 5, I suggest that you go back and listen to all of them. I trust you'll be able to learn one or two things. Today's episode is such an exciting one. It's all about travel, principles I've learned during my travels. From the time I was a little girl, I've always loved the idea and also the process of traveling. I traveled out of the country for the first time in my early 20s. The first country I visited was Zimbabwe. I know it's just a neighboring country to Zambia, but that was a big deal. I had visited Victoria Falls on the Zambian side, and seeing it from the Zimbabwe side was just as spectacular. Side note, if you've never visited Victoria Falls, you need to take that trip. It is one of the wonders of the world. It is just beautiful. I hope you get a chance to visit. Back to my travels and the things that I've learned while traveling. So I've been to 17 countries. Obviously, Zambia is my home country, but as I mentioned, I've been to Zimbabwe as well. And after that, South Africa, Malawi, Mozambique, England, Ireland, Kenya, Netherlands, United Arab Emirates, Canada, USA, of course, because this is where I live now, Mexico, Australia, France, and Spain. I probably have forgotten one or two, but I've been to almost 20 countries. I've mostly traveled with friends or family, something I really love. There's nothing like enjoying a new place with your friends and with your family, with people you love. But for the first time last year, I chose to travel alone. My 50th birthday was coming up, and as a gift, I asked my family if I could take a sabbatical and travel on my own. It took a little bit of negotiating. The kids were not sure if they wanted me to be away for that long, and I too was concerned about a long absence. But we figured it out, and I was able to break down my trips into shorter periods, and that worked for all of us. So in 2019, I had the rare privilege of traveling to Sydney, to London, to Paris, to Dubai, and to LA. I had the privilege of traveling with one of my spiritual daughters when I went to Paris, which I am so thankful that she was able to come with me. But the other times were solo travels. I had such a great time and I learned so much. So the things that I'm going to share with you are things that I've picked up during my travels for the past 30 years. So here we go. First thing I've learned from traveling. At the core, people are the same everywhere. We all just want to be loved, to love, and to belong somewhere. I don't know if I can put it any more clear than that. It doesn't matter the culture, the background, the language spoken, the laws of the country, what drives communities. At the core, this is what I've come to find. We are all the same. We desire the same things. We desire love. We desire to be loved. And to have that sense of belonging, that's the first thing I've learned. The second thing I discovered in my travels is that loneliness is a real worldwide epidemic. We are so busy on our fast communication tools, and yet we are so lonely. How do I know this? Because in all these countries, or at least most of them, I've had the privilege of sitting, waiting in line for the plane or the bus or in grocery stores, and just being able to look at somebody in the eye and smile at them and acknowledge them. I've seen what difference that makes. And I've had the privilege of having deep conversations with people where they open up to an extent it's scary scares me, even because, we just met, and how is that person pouring their heart like that? But I've come to realize that people are really, really lonely out there. Not every single human being, but this is an issue. The third thing that I've learned is that I don't need to be afraid to enter people's brokenness, even in a different culture with language barriers. Real life examples. In 1996, I left Zambia after teaching at Mukinge Girls Secondary School for about 5 years. I left Zambia to go and study at a Bible college in Cape Town. It was my first time being away from home for that long. I ended up staying there for almost a year. Remember now, 1996 was just 2 years or so after the fall of apartheid. So the country was going through a major transition. When I arrived in South Africa, I kind of had a background of what South Africans had experienced. We had talked about some of these things because my best friend, an Afrikaner lady that had come to Mukinge, and we hit it off. So my experience of an Afrikaans-speaking African lady who is also white was incredibly great. However, I did know about the racism that had happened to Black people in South Africa, so I kind of had that background. This was also the time the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was going on. So I would spend my afternoons after school. I would go back to my room and listen to my radio live. Men and women telling their stories of how their loved ones had been brutally murdered. It was so shocking to my system. I didn't even know where to place it. That level of injustice and brokenness and grief was new to me. But I chose to listen because I wanted to understand what my brothers and sisters had gone through. And out of that, it gave me an extra layer of compassion for the people that I was interacting with in South Africa. So even though as a Zambian, a Black woman from Zambia, I was coming at it from a whole different perspective. I had never experienced racism or apartheid at that level. So for the first time, I understood where my Black South African brothers and sisters were coming from. Allowing your heart to be touched by somebody else's brokenness creates a new level of empathy and human connection. So even though it was heartbreaking to listen to those stories, I'm glad that I allowed myself to listen. During that same year, I had an opportunity and the privilege to travel from Cape Town by car with a church group to go and do ministry in Mozambique. I didn't know up until we got into the vehicle that I was going to be the only Black person in this group of about 20 people. So for about 2 weeks, I traveled, I ate, I lived, and prayed with a group of Afrikaans-speaking white Christians. I learned so much about where they were coming from. Those who were willing to explain to me what they were taught as children taught me so much. And I had the privilege again to understand the brokenness that the Afrikaans-speaking people were facing even at that time. My lessons in facing brokenness were not done yet. When we got to Mozambique, I realized that most of the people we were ministering to in the villages were women and children. There were very, very few men in that village. When I dug a little bit more, I was told that most of the men had been lost to the war. I remember one afternoon, it was my turn to share with the women in that village. And because I speak a little bit of Nyanja, I was able to communicate with most of them. And I shared the gospel with everything I had. As the women shared their stories with me that day of how they had been raped, of how their husbands were killed, and how they were raising children who were a result of those rapes, I was heartbroken. I didn't know what to do with that information except to look them in the eye and just let them see that there was a human connection happening there and that I would never forget them and that I would be praying for them. That experience changed my life forever. So if you get to travel, pray that God breaks your heart over the things that break His heart. And as you connect with other people, God in His grace may even bring healing to the things that you've never addressed before as you see Him heal other people's brokenness. Number 4, approach people with an open mind. Of course, be sensible. Be mindful of your surroundings and your safety, especially when you're traveling alone as a woman. But when you approach people with an open mind, you will learn a lot. And by the way, read your travel guide carefully. When I was in Sydney, I ended up at a nude beach. Yes, I did. And I was so excited. I was going to take pictures and, maybe get to talk to people. And then when I got there, I realized several people were naked. I got out of there so fast. So approach people with an open mind, but do read your travel guide so you don't end up in the wrong place like I did, unless, of course, that's your type of thing. But that's a story for another time. Number 5, leverage chance encounters for deep universal lessons. You just never know who is your neighbor on the flight or in a grocery store. On one of my flights, I believe it was the flight from Dubai to Athens, Greece, I sat next to a doctor who taught me a whole new lesson on empathy. He said for the longest time, he did not understand what patients go through when they are laying down on that bed right before surgery, until his mentor or supervisor asked all of them to put on that very embarrassing gown that patients put on and lay down on that bed and experience what a patient experiences. He said that totally changed his life on how to handle patients who are going into surgery. That changed my life too, because it taught me something very, very deep about walking a mile in another person's shoes. So don't dismiss these chance encounters with people. I believe God can use those very short conversations to teach us something deep. Number 6, the front that people present is there for a reason. Usually it's because they've been hurt deeply. On one flight, our flight was delayed for a long time, something like 3 or 4 hours. So I got a chance to talk to a few people. And while chatting, this one guy, very, very arrogant, he must have been maybe in his mid-50s, very arrogantly tells me, I can get any girl I want. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And so being the counselor I am, that didn't faze me in any way. So I said, all right, so why is that important to you? So he went on and on and on about how he can get any girl. And he tells all these girls when he meets them that he doesn't want a relationship and it's up to them to go along with it or not. And for the most part, they go along with it because he is just that irresistant. The whole time we were talking, an older man, I think he was Irish, was listening in and he just couldn't help it. So he decided to join in. As we talked, I listened intently to this man, and the whole time I was thinking, there is something you're hiding, and most likely it's a broken heart. As we chatted, with just very few strategic questions I asked him, with tears in his eyes, he told me he had lost the love of his life to cancer. He wasn't willing to give his heart away to any woman ever again. And so all these relationships he was moving in and out of, his goal the whole time was to protect his broken heart. When he opened up and shared that, I prayed for that man, that one day he would find the healing he needs and be able to reconnect again with another human being at that level, because he is lonely. So when you travel, just be aware that the front that people present is there for a reason. Number 7, the human walls we build between races, cultures, languages, all those walls and barriers are very superficial. When I traveled to Sydney, the main reason I was there was to attend Hillsong. I had been planning to do this trip for like 20 years, and I was so excited to walk into this incredible convention center with thousands and thousands of women from every background imaginable, singing and worshiping together with one purpose. At that time, all these superficial walls meant nothing. We were there for one purpose. I will never forget that experience. Number 8, and this is going to be the last one. Diversity is so beautiful. It ties in with where I ended in last time's episode about embracing diversity, because God has created so much for us to enjoy, so many differences, so many colors, so many textures. Yes, I'm repeating this one point because it is so important. In the broken world that we live in, if we only all decided to appreciate one another the way God has created us, what a difference that would make. So traveling has helped me to appreciate the fact that diversity is beautiful. Now it's your turn to share with me which countries you've visited and what you've learned in your travels. I'd love to continue learning from all of you, so please feel free to share in the comments and tell me where you've traveled before and maybe where you hope to travel. By the way, if I were to rank the places that I loved visiting the most, up to today, my favorite city in the whole world is Cape Town, followed by Sydney. I loved visiting Paris. It's beautiful. However, I think I found it the most challenging because there's just something about the French attitude, in my experience now, that you have to warm up to. And I wasn't there long enough to navigate what was going on. So maybe one day when I go back, I will have a better experience in France. It's been wonderful spending time with you. I hope you are learning one or two things from these very intimate and vulnerable conversations with me. I look forward to sharing more with you. Please come back soon to hear what else I have for you. If you've been encouraged or blessed in any way by this episode, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share. If you've been encouraged, most likely somebody else will be encouraged too. You have been listening to Precious 50. This is your friend Bridget saying goodbye for now and God bless.